The human history of war is wrought with pain, sorrow, and misconduct. By misconduct, I mean the harming of civilians, of women and children, the killing of them, the attack on men who didn't do anything to someone or to us. And when we analyze human history, we see that we've come a long way. There are many things that human beings have done in our past that are impossible to wipe clean from history. I mean, impossible to reconcile. My own ancestors, the Vikings, who I look up to, did terrible things, murdered men, women, and children. And how I look up to them is the key. I look up to them in the fact that they were explorers who were not afraid of what would be on the edge of what they knew, beyond that edge. They went out regardless of knowledge of what would happen if they went to a foreign land. They charged into battle regardless of the odds of victory. They traded with everyone, no matter what culture they were, and they actually didn't view race or ethnicity or even sometimes religion as a factor in deciding who a people were. They admired strength. They admired a society which could view themselves as being able to defend against anyone. And if they met a staunch defender, that was all the more respectful. But we can't wipe away what the Vikings did, and these are my ancestors. I also have conquistador ancestors, but we're talking about Vikings right now. We can't wipe away what they did. We can't wipe away all the horrors they wrought. But we can understand them in perspective. Everyone before this point in time, and especially before 200 years ago, operated on a moral standard that was much less first world than our own. And a moral standard that still exists today in most parts of the world. Might is right. The law of the jungle. Anyone who can take something deserves it, basically. And it wasn't necessarily even their fault that they had this mentality, because this is what it took to survive back then. This is what it was necessary in order to gain enough resources for your tribe, to survive, to pass on your genes, to protect your children. You had to take as much as possible. Now, that doesn't excuse it. That doesn't make the Vikings good people, and I'm using the Vikings as an example, but there are countless ancestors of all of us and civilizations of the past that fought by the code of might is right, or my gods are better. My gods are better wasn't really how the Vikings fought. They admired strength, and they were willing to go out and try and take what they wanted. That makes them more pirates than anything, but I digress. The Vikings cannot be said to be good people. Most of our ancestors weren't good people. But our reality as nations and our relationship with one another was defined very much in the Western world by the Vikings. And there were honorable traits that they had. They were very brave. They were explorers. They were colonists. And without these sayings, the world would be a very different shape, and we wouldn't have as much diversity as we do now, because they spread so much trade. They carved around Europe, and they sent out ships that brought goods to faraway lands and faraway lands back. Like, for instance, in a Viking mound in northern Europe, there was discovered a little wood Buddha, which is a very far way to go. And of course, the Vikings had dealings with Constantinople and the emperors there for a while. But this kind of trait occurs in many societies of our past, and understanding them is the key. It's not about respecting everything that they did, but respecting the good parts and taking the good parts, making them a part of ourselves. The bravery, the fearless exploration, the acceptance of everyone's gods as being viable, even if you're fighting against those other people's gods. And then we toss aside the brutality, the rape, the pillage, the stealing. We toss that aside, and if everyone takes the good parts from their ancestors and embraces them, they can both admire their ancestors for the good parts and distinguish themselves from them by not embracing the bad parts. This is what we have to do because human history is so militaristic and brutal, and there are more instances of total war than just raiding. It takes the breath away when you truly look at the bigger picture. In conclusion, I just want to say, whoever your ancestors were and whoever you look up to, just because you want to look up to your ancestors, that doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that they did. You don't have to explain why they did this or that, or try to make up an excuse for it. Just accept the good parts, make them a part of yourself, and say, okay, they did bad things. Let's toss that out. That's how we handle it. That's how we become a progressive society. That's how we go beyond what our ancestors ever dreamed of, is that we get rid of the bad parts and we start to realize who we are because of where we came from, where our ancestors came from, where humans in general came from. And then we develop into a greater society by proper perspective. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope you all have a very good day.